Hi guys, what is going on and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So it is a freezing cold Sunday morning in my shed, and since it's been almost a month now since I switched from glaive to poleaxe, I thought it was really about time that we sort of revisited the class, had a little bit of an update. How have I found it? What skills am I using? What's my stat distribution? What armor, etc, etc. So we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. I guess we'll probably end up calling this a poleaxe guide. I guess I feel I should always sort of qualify anything on this channel that says guide. I'm far from the greatest player in this game, but hopefully if you're an average player as well, then maybe this will perhaps be more focused towards you. So yeah, so at the start of Season 7, I was initially playing glaive, and I really enjoyed it, been playing glaive for quite a long time when I decided it was time to have a switch, time just to mix things back up a little bit, and I must admit I've been wanting to go back to poleaxe for quite a while, and we got some really interesting runes come out with Season 7. So that's what made it interesting for me to go back to poleaxe, and that's kind of why I decided to in the end. I've got one craft as well, and I'd also got a decent set of heavy armour I could go back to. So let's cover first then attribute point distribution. So there are really a couple of viable options here, I think, for poleaxe. I've gone full armour. I think there is certainly a case, and a few people I've seen have made the case, and fairly convincingly, no particular reason why I haven't necessarily gone to toughness, but basically armour and toughness, in effect, you're trying to achieve the same thing, which is increased tankiness. You're either doing it through increased armour, which is going to reduce the amount of damage you take, or increased toughness, which is basically just having a larger pool of damage that you can take because you've got more hit points. So you're just kind of controlling either side of the equation, either how big the bucket is or how quickly the water going into the bucket, goes in, or a mix of the two. You do, of course, get the self-heal with the rune, which we're going to talk about in a minute, so I think that also favours it slightly towards toughness if you're using weapon dance. So yeah, no particular reason why I haven't. I probably will end up switching to toughness at some point shortly. You could, of course, also go into strength. The problem I have with doing a strength-based poleaxe is that, unlike something like the glaive, where damage scales exponentially around blunt, things don't do that in the skill set with poleaxe. If we look at our abilities, for example, okay, that is actually blunt damage, but 100% base blunt, pretty poor amount of scaling. 105% slashing, 120% slashing, and 140% base slashing. So actually, the multiplier is quite small. Weapon dance, well, what a horrible ability that is. 317% base slashing, okay, better. But let's go and have a look at the glaive, what I was using before, and you'll see things like we've got on just a normal non-ultimate ability, 375% base blunt, ultimate 681%. You see, these are huge increases. So a small increase in blunt damage results in a huge increase in your end damage because it's getting multiplied, well, 6.8 times. Whereas you're not getting that on poleaxe. So putting attribute points into strength makes a much smaller difference on a poleaxe than it does on a glaive because it doesn't scale in the same way. Hopefully that kind of is a reasonably easy way of explaining it. And that's why I don't think doing a damage poleaxe is really worth it, because the damage just isn't quite there in the same way. So with that being said, where does that leave us in terms of equipment that I'm currently running? I've got a pretty decent crafted poleaxe. I find it a really hard one to switch on this one because, one, it's got the agility plus 15, which is kind of nice to get, and it's also got that slashing damage, that plus 268. And because I have pretty decent slashing AP at 1914, part of that is being funded by that agility increase. And if you're wondering why I've got all my points in armor, but I've still got 32 agility, it is because of this weapon, which gives me that plus 15. It means that the slashing damage is really what I want my points to be. Ideally, of course, that plus 143 piercing damage would be in slashing armor penetration, and the weapon would be legendary. But trying to craft a decent poleaxe is actually pretty difficult because it's got so many stats available to it. The odds of getting the combination that you really want are actually pretty low, and that's kind of reflected on the market as well. There's really not been very much nice for sale. I'm kind of keeping half an eye on it. If a really nice one comes up that's legendary and got better stats than I've got currently, then yeah, I'm well up for getting it. But yeah, currently I've not really found anything that is really better than this convincingly enough for the million or so silver that's going to cost me to actually really find it worth buying. But with that said, let's move on now and have a little bit of a revisit to some of the skills we just talked about to talk a little bit about why I'm using them and how they work in conjunction with some of the runes. So, the 3 base skills and the ultimate. So let's just cover the 3 base skills first, and then we'll talk through the 2 possible ultimates that we have available. So, pushback. It's a classic ability. Everyone uses it. And it actually gets buffed by a rune in this patch, which means that instead of just standing still and pushing forwards with the Poleaxe, you actually basically take almost like a mini charge or a big step forwards now with one of the runes. That makes it a more viable ability. It was a pretty viability beforehand, to be honest, but now you just get a little bit of extra distance out of it. So if a hero is trying to run away, you can sometimes actually just cover that ground. You get a removes daze effect on yourself, so that means you can stand up pretty much easier, which is actually really quite nice to have. And so yeah, pushback, absolutely an ability pretty much everyone has on this class. Vector Corbin. This is your main damage dealer. It actually got a buff a season or 2 ago, basically to add this damage reduction. So the extra effect, each time a target is hit, their defense will drop. The first hit 20%, second hit 40%, third hit 60%, and so on. So effectively, it means that once you land your first hit, the enemy then has 20% less armor for your next hit, so you do more damage. That's well worth having. Pretty nice against units, particularly if you've got a friendly unit here as well. Pretty nice against heroes as well, because if you've got a friendly unit or friendly allies around you, that means everyone is going to be doing more damage to the enemy unit or hero. The base damage of it is actually pretty good, and it's got a pretty decent AoE. This is your only real large-scale damage ability that you have as the Poleaxe class. It's the only real AoE ability that you're going to be having. And now this is going to be the one that's going to confuse some of you. Weapon Dance. It is a horrible ability. There is nothing good about it at all. I hate it. But it has the most ultimate rune available to it, and that is what makes it dominant. Because it can self-heal. And actually, it self-heals more effectively, in my opinion, than the longsword does. Which, ironically, it's using the skill against in this little animation here. So, Weapon Dance is why I've swapped out for Billhook. Billhook is, of course, a better ability. I know some of you are going to say that in the comments. It is, I agree. But the self-heal is significant enough to make it worthwhile, in my opinion. But we'll go and have a look at the runes in a minute. Finally, for the ultimates, there's 2 options. Both are viable. I spent quite a bit of time playing both. Someone on stream was really keen for me to try out Lockable Strike. This is a couple of weeks ago. And so I did, and I played with it for about a week. It's nice. I like it in a sense. You do a much higher base damage. You can see actually the base damage points is quite a lot higher. And because it's multiple abilities, it seems to hit a lot harder. It does cause knockdown, and it does cause targets to dismount. But people can use stun recovery in it. Like, a musket's jump back can use that. It is harder to hit because it's shorter range, and it doesn't sort of auto-lock on. So you're sort of basically trading increased damage plus an element of AoE, so it is more useful against units because it does sort of smash through the front line of a stalwart shield to some degree, for basically a more guaranteed, a more secure lockdown in which the enemy cannot escape. I sort of flicked between the 2 a little while. In the end, I prefer Rough Justice. I don't know, it may be an element that I find it harder. I dislike the lack of certainty you get around Lockable Strike, because sometimes they escape, sometimes they don't. I like the fact that this is a guaranteed, once you've got them, that's it. There's no question about it, and that's not necessarily a good thing from a game balancing point of view, but from a which ability should you use, for me, I ended up preferring Rough Justice, because I can then bring my unit into play, bring my paladins over, park my paladins on top of the enemy hero, get that real surge of damage from them. So for me, I'm using this for the control, and then I use my unit for the damage. I don't think you need the extra damage from Lockable Strike, but both are very much viable ultimates. Okay, so that kind of covers skills. So what about runes then? Well, as we said, you can all get a small charge when using pushback. So, as I say, nice to have. Certainly gives you a good little buff, a little bit of health increase, and then this is the important one, and the sole reason I'm using Weapon Dance. The Weapon Dance now gives an extra 20% of your maximum health over 5 seconds. Then it says, but the increases cooldown by 2 seconds. Okay, that's not an issue, is it? So how does that work, and why is that a self-heal? Because it doesn't sound like one. So, in effect, if you have 20,000 hit points, but you lose half of them down to 10,000. And you increase your maximum health by 20%. That's going to take you from 20,000 to 24,000 hit points. But it basically also takes you from 10 to 14,000 hit points for that 5-second duration. But then at the end of that 5 seconds, that 20,000, 24,000 hit points goes back down to 20,000. But it doesn't take the 4,000 extra hit points it's given you away again. They stay. So in effect, you get a massive increase or heal out of it. And we'll show this with a clip. Hopefully I'll put a clip in now. But in effect, it acts as a self-heal. It's like a 5-second self-heal. You'll get that little boost of health when you first use it. And then when that 5 seconds ticks down, you'll get another secondary boost of health. And actually, it's a pretty significant health boost. And certainly well worth having. So, yeah, that is for me the reason why I use Weapon Dance. Because as I say, the ability, as an ability, is pretty horrible. Certainly not worth using to do any damage. So moving away from the actual weapon, we move on to the helmet. Everything else, I'm just trying to increase my health. Plus 600 hit points, plus 250, plus 800 hit points, and health recovery when you get killed. And it's the same through down here, plus the 600 hit points, plus 250 hit points, and reduced damage when you're quite low on health. So that little extra tank when you're almost dead. So it's all about just getting that increased health. That's what all my other runes focus on. So, yeah, hopefully that gives you a reasonable overview of kind of what the Poleaxe is all about and kind of what it's like. We'll just hop into a few clips now, just a few more clips to see what it's like in some more battle situations. And we'll talk it through a little bit there, and then we'll end the video. So, let's hop into some battles. So, here we go. We're into our first fight. I was actually going to go up the other siege tower, but the serfs came down, and then so did the paladins. So I thought, well, you know, if we can catch a few of these at the bottom of the tower, well worth doing. Hopped on my horse just because I was a bit nervous about dual blades. You know, I guess any heavy armor class kind of has a bit of a weakness to dual blades in this sense, particularly if you get caught in the open without any team support. But we clear through kind of a few of those paladins. Always worth grabbing a few kind of where you can in that sort of situation. And I'm just waiting to see what the enemy team does. Obviously, there's some more paladins, you know, the remainder of balance, some shields, quite a bit of other stuff kicking around at the top. But I know my friendly team's on my right of me, so that's kind of what, you know, I'm just sort of hanging on for. Just engage some of these serfs, and then the paladin charge comes in. I move back because I don't want to get hit by it, but as they're going, I know they trebbed here. I decided there was enough there. It's worth me just charging in, because if we hold them on that point, the treb will get plenty of kills anyway, so it's good for the team. And actually, to be fair, we really didn't get hit that much. Then I used my rough justice. We locked down the Poleaxe, which the longsword, sorry, which basically condemns him to death. And that's why I really like the ability. He is now stuck in an advancing unit of friendly troops. There's no way he's going to get out of that. I might not get the kill. It might not do the same amount of damage as lock him a strike. But it really secures me in the damage. So we're now kind of getting into a strange chase situation. I'm trying to catch up with these Namkhans, which I can't really do. This longbow's got quite a lot of escape skill. I decided there's no point me really trying to chase the longbow down. And this is maybe the downside of not having something like Billhook. You know, we set the condos in the hope that they would catch up those Namkhans. They get a few, but they don't really. Thankfully, we do get rough justice off cooldown, so we just kill the bow. You know, it is really no chance for that bow in that sort of situation. He should probably have ran when he had the opportunity. And so I kind of probably got a little bit deep in the fight here. Still trying to chase these Namkhans, who now still managed to escape me in retreat mode. I'm getting a bit frustrated with them by this point. But I suppose we have had up to 60 kills now with these condos, so we can't complain too much. I set them on a charge, and then I get stuck into a pretty tough hero fight. We go for our bet to Corbin to try and get some damage against this Nadachi, which we do. But we've now got a longsword here as well. I'm taking quite a lot of damage, so I go for my self-heal. You see that initial burst of healing that I get. Then after a few seconds it ends, and I heal again. I'm trying to keep these guys pinned down. Unfortunately, then Nadachi has a skill recovery, which is a bit unfortunate. I have an ult, which I use, but it doesn't really help me, and a third enemy hero comes up, and then a fourth, and then cavalry. I'm trying to use my self-heal to keep myself alive, but I'm out of stamina. And then eventually we get overwhelmed. But that self-heal really kept me in that fight quite a lot longer. You know, I had 4 heroes on me by the end. The healing you get off that is significant. Okay, you know, we did die. I suppose it didn't really help us ultimately. But, you know, the team was on its way down those stairs. Had more support turned up, we could have actually survived that. And that would have been really interesting to see. So that's why I like the self-heal. That's why I think you lose things like the bill hook, which would have been useful against that longbow hero earlier on, you know, particularly if my Rough Justice was still on cooldown, you know, but I think the self-heal is worth it, at least in my opinion. That's been my experience so far. Anyway, respawn back on my horse with the paladins. One area that the Poleaxe really does struggle is on horseback. It doesn't really seem very effective at all, particularly when you compare it to something like the glaive or a spear. Much better at horse combat. And I was actually going to come up to this ledge to jump off to take some damage to show you how the self-heal worked, when this maul decided to rudely have a go at my paladins. So we did pretty much exactly what I said in the introduction, which was you can lock him down and I can drag my paladins on top of him. I don't need Rough Justice to do the damage for me. And now I can make use of things like my Duke of Corbin, which does a really good amount of damage against these Condottieri, and pretty much just wipe them out and use them along with the rest of my paladins just to finish them off. And it wipes out the unit pretty convincingly. We take a little bit of damage, but nothing too bad. So I go back to try and jump off yet again. So I was trying to create a little clip, which I'm going to put in the start of the video to jump off, and that's what I was going to show you. When another unit of Condottieri turns up. So we come back down the stairs again. This unit wasn't actually going for the fight with me, but, you know, since they were sort of here, it seemed rude to leave them and they were going for the back of the team. Go for the pushback to knock some of them down. Go for the Duke of Corbin, and we get quite a few kills on them at the back. When the friendly Nadachi turns up, I mean, he just went in too deep, unfortunately. I was going to go Rough Justice him, but actually completely unnecessary because we can just wipe them out. We can then use my Paladin charge just to wipe out the rest of these condos pretty effectively. As we do. And they are now dead. And then I can use things like my Rough Justice to finish off the remainder of them as we kill the enemy team out. I was then kind of deciding where I wanted to go here. I was thinking about chasing down those Pavis on the side, but actually quite a lot of ground to cover. There's also some enemy cavalry there, and I thought realistically they're probably not going to be catching them up. You know, Poleaxe is not the fastest class in the game. Don't think it's really going to be happening for me. So instead, I bring the unit back on and I'm trying to go for the stalwarts. I push my hero behind, try and go for the damage, but get knocked down by that short sword, unfortunately. And I just take too much damage too quickly. Even as a tanky class, you're still kind of vulnerable when you get that heavily outnumbered, particularly with the range fire coming in as well. Cuts through me as a hero really quite quickly, and unfortunately get myself killed. Paladins do a pretty good job of fighting on, actually help clear the point, get us a random hero kill. Friendly cav comes in, clears the point. I kind of saw that as my opportunity to try and get the unit out with some life left. So I set them to retreat. Whether that was worth it, I should have maybe just left them to fight on, to be honest. Particularly as then the enemy start to push back in. Particularly with some pikes and stuff like that. So probably would have been worth me leaving the unit on the point. Took me sort of 30-40 seconds to respawn and come back in with my Tercio. Still starting to really pressure the C point by this point. Pretty confident that hopefully we're going to get it. A little bit of cav here to deal with. I'm kind of just hanging back anyone who wants to try and have a go for this unit. You know, obviously I want to be able to lock down. And that's kind of what I'm really looking for. A little bit of enemy cav coming in we can use some abilities for. But mostly I'm just directing the guns to make sure they take the cav out. And they do a pretty convincing job of that, of dealing with it. The problem, of course, with this build so far is that I don't really have a lot of CC, I guess. Well, I still have a decent amount. I guess I have my Rough Justice and my Pushback and my 2 CC abilities. Duke of Corbin obviously has pretty much no CC, nor does Weapon Dance. So you're losing that bill hook. Obviously, previously, Poleaxe, you know, had the bill hook, which made it a really dominant stun class, because you could push someone over, you could then bill hook them, and then you could Rough Justice them. And really, by that lot, they don't really stand all that much of a chance, because the amount of time, you know, you can keep an enemy hero on the floor is just so intense that, you know, they're really sort of done for in that sort of situation. So we start to push forwards a little bit again, but I think, well, I've used over half my ammo already, so I decided to throw my unit back on the supply point, which we've just captured, and I decided to push in. Actually, an enemy Nadachi here, so I just go for the lockdown on him. Actually get a fair chunk of damage. I was thinking then I'll go back to try and get in with my pushback, but it doesn't seem to really land. I'm not quite sure why it didn't quite land there properly. Unfortunately, an enemy spear comes over, fully slams into me. I decide this is perhaps not such a good situation now. Go for the self-heal, but jump over the side. The Nadachi tries to follow me. I can use that rune. See, that was the push, the charge element of pushback enabled me to hit him, even though he was quite a long way away. So that's why that rune is really nice to have. But we get through it, we are still alive, and now we can just keep activating the self-heal, and we should be able to get ourselves back up to health pretty quickly. Hopefully, there we go. And you see you get the instant amount of heal on the self-heal, then in a few seconds time, boom, and you get another element of heal. So you're actually gaining quite a lot of hit points over that time. And it means you actually don't really even need to use the bandage that often. I felt a bit bad for this short sword. He actually made a really good move, and sorry to that guy, because he did actually say in chat, I hope this doesn't end up in a video. My bad. He actually made a good move. He went for the guns. That was the thing he needed to be doing. It was just a little bit unlucky. Obviously, he couldn't get his iron sides activated. A little bit unlucky that I happened to be a Poleaxe, because Rough Justice, you know, there's obviously no real counter to it other than being on a horse or just avoiding it. So it wasn't a lot he could do, and then he got locked down and obviously just got shot to pieces by the guns. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an overview of kind of what the Poleaxe is like in most games. Rough Justice obviously plays a huge part in it, and that's kind of why I like it, I think, over Lockable Strike. But also the pushback is very nice for a lot of stun control, and also you've got quite a lot of damage with that Vector Corbin. But probably for me, the self-heal is the ability that is most enjoyable, actually, because it really enables you to stay in the fight. You don't have to run back and hide around the corner. You don't really have to worry about Namkhans anymore, because I can heal now quicker than they can bleed me. So it's not really too much of a problem anymore. And that, for me, is kind of what makes it a really interesting ability. I guess it is worth saying that these are Season 7 runes. So there is no guarantee that come Season 8, that self-heal is still going to be there. I just have no idea whether they're going to change the runes up for different ones each season, or if we're going to see roughly the same similar runes. So, yeah, really don't know. So this video may end up, at least from a rune point of view, changing quite a bit at the end of Season 7. So it is worth bearing that in mind. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel for a lot more Conqueror's Blade content. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all on the next video.